The title of this presentation is Mastering the Dreaded C Word for More Productive and Successful Meetings. And when we take a look at this topic, the dreaded C word or criticism, we want to spend some time together looking at understanding that criticism, especially when you're on the receiving end of criticism, is the second greatest producer of stress, according to a study that we started in 2003 called the Strategies for Enhancing Performance. And besides being the second greatest producer of stress, it is also a situation that workers today are least effective at handling. So we want to learn how to benefit when you're on the receiving end of criticism. We also want to explore together how to handle the tendency to personalize what others say and let it pierce through and hurt. And we need to take a look at understanding criticism, because people don't even want to use the word criticism, and for some of you, just hearing the word criticism makes you cringe and uncomfortable. So these are the topics we want to explore. And one of the things that's interesting about criticism is asking yourself, can you escape criticism? Now, one gentleman jumped up and said immediately, yes, you can, because if you're in a meeting, you won't say anything, and that way you can't get criticized. But as soon as he finished saying it, it just hit him, and he realized that he'll get criticized for not contributing to the meeting. So of any subject I know, this is one topic area you cannot escape, regardless of how successful you are in your career, or how much money you've made, or what your ethnic background is, your age, your sex. You cannot escape this subject area. And criticism doesn't limit itself to the workplace. It occurs at work and it occurs at home. But when it comes to understanding this topic that you can't escape, can criticism sometimes be positive? We'd like to think so, because many people don't even want to call the word criticism. They want it to be positive. But when you think about it, the outcomes we're looking for with quality criticism are positive. But when you peel it apart and really delve into the topic area, like an onion, layer by layer, you realize that what's being conveyed to the other person is some degree of negativity. Regardless of how great, it's some degree of negativity. And with that negativity, it's not all bad. Think of it like a yin and a yang relationship, where on one end of the spectrum you have the positive or praise, and on the other end of the spectrum you have the negative or the criticism. Now, if you're creative, I want you to try to imagine the following. You ready? Let's say a memo comes out and you can no longer give criticism in the workplace. All you can do is praise people. Imagine, all you are going to give is praise, and all you're going to receive is praise. What happens in the workplace if all we can do is deliver praise? I only know of three things. First, when you're always giving praise, it sets the level of performance that's less than desirable in a fiercely competitive workplace. I mean, think about it. If I'm praising you, what am I really saying to you? You've got it. Exactly. I'm doing a good job, so keep doing it. But did we say do it at a higher level? Not necessarily. And so this is where praise is different from criticism, because criticism implies change. And if you're always praising, you can set the level of performance that's less than desirable in our fiercely competitive work environment. The second thing that happens if all you're doing is giving praise is that people don't always buy into every bit of praise that you offer. After all, if you step back and look at it, many of us come into the workplace with the assumption that we're not perfect, Therefore, how can we be always doing everything so terrifically well? And so when you're always getting that praise, it begins to occur to you that maybe this person isn't being genuine. And then suddenly the leader, all of a sudden, trust and respect gets chipped away at. And third, I'll throw this one in. If you are always receiving praise, sometimes individuals get an ego that's out of line to the true value that they bring to an organization. So it's not like you and I can't wait and get up in the morning to get some criticism. It's just that we need to understand it's not all that bad. Unlike praise, criticism will be a change agent. It causes you to change, and by making changes, the whole idea is that you will achieve desired end results, achieve certain goals, grow professionally, grow personally, and see, it's a great motivator when done effectively. But when it comes to being on the receiving end of criticism, we need to ask this question: who's in control during the criticism exchange? Unbeknownst to popular belief, it's not the giver, but the receiver. It's the receiver who's in control. And of course, all of a sudden it hits you if you're a giver. No wonder you ponder over whether to say something to another individual, and no wonder you're worried about whether or not you're going to demotivate a person or get into a huge argument with someone, because we instinctually know that once we open our mouth as givers, the control shifts to the receiver, and it's the receiver who can, number one, challenge the giver and say, well, give me an example. When was the last time I did that? So not only are they challenging the giver, they can also agree or disagree with the giver, and that's the second thing that the receiver has control over. And finally, and the most frustrating of all, it's the receiver who can decide whether or not to do anything about that situation or not, and just ignore the giver. But there's more that the receiver can do to utilize the control that's inherently theirs, especially to avoid personalizing what others say. And when asking hundreds of people, what does it mean when you say, I personalize the criticism? I've seen two tracks. The one track that I hear most commonly said is that when I'm on the receiving end of criticism, it hurts. And it's difficult to take. Well, for some of us, it's true. The truth does hurt. And sometimes we need to be hit by a 2x4. But other people, when asking what does personalizing the criticism mean, they say it's when I get into a conversation that all of a sudden I get all emotional and frustrated and upset, and I can't engage in the conversation, and then I get hurt. And that you and I have some control over. It's what I refer to as learning to de-emotionalize the criticism. And when it comes to de-emotionalizing criticism, there are three things that you and I want to zoom in on. The first is making sure we're aware of the importance of inspecting what's being said. Here's an interesting fact. From all of our surveys and research that we've done on this subject area, do you realize that most people have not been trained on how to give criticism? So that means chances are great givers are going to be pretty crude. So don't let it throw you when they don't express it in ways that you would prefer. Besides inspecting the criticism, you also want to pay attention to your own personal confidence. And when it comes to your personal confidence, sometimes we're more vulnerable. And then we also need to pay attention to the big picture. And when it comes to dealing with the big picture, I want to introduce to you a very valuable skill that you'll find lots of uses. It's called the 2M simultaneous focus quick charge. Now, this technique is used instantly in situations, without detection from others, and it works. The 2M means the following. The little m is the micro, which means the more immediate or the short term. The big M is the macro or the bigger picture in the long term. And you want to have a camera lens in front of you and then take both of those into view simultaneously. And when you do, all of a sudden you realize if you're in the micro and being criticized, you want to zoom out into the macro picture and ask yourself, am I dealing with life and death? And then you can zoom back into the micro because chances are great, as a meeting planner, we're not going to deal with life and death. Then again, you also want to zoom out into the macro picture and ask yourself, am I perfect? And I know some of us may strive to be perfect, but we understand in reality we're not perfect. And therefore, we need to give ourselves permission to have made a mistake or to have disappointed someone. Then again, you go back into the micro and pay attention to what's happening. The other thing you want to remember when you zoom out into the macro picture is fact. At least the person took the time to say something to you. The worst thing to have happen is for the person to go behind your back and tell everybody else and they know and you don't. So you want to practice the 2M simultaneous focus quick charge. You also want to remember in the big picture, all you're getting is information. You're the one who colors it. Now, when you take just these few concepts and the understanding of criticism, all of a sudden, Eleanor Roosevelt's very famous quote comes to life and has meaning. Her very famous quote was, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent."